Hi, I am Disgusting, and today we are talking about Archer on Netflix. Today we're going to be talking about Archer. Originally this was going to be a review. However, although there will be some review elements in it, I will actually just be discussing the show over the entirety of its existence. There will be spoilers for anyone who hasn't actually watched the show, but given the most recent season of Archer, this needed to be more than just a review. The show is about Sterling Archer and the spy agency ISIS. Not to be confused with the terrorist organisation. The first few seasons are just him and his team going on spy adventures and basically just being funny. The show is a comedy and it's just basically a sitcom about being a spy. And the later seasons, they actually diverge a little bit from the spy concept of the programme, and each season becomes a little bit different from the last in its own right. Spoiler alert, this is right up until Sterling Archer dies. This meant that the writers actually decided to stall the conclusion of this season, and instead, the next few seasons that followed were completely self-contained, the same actors and basic characters. However, they were all actually different people and totally unconnected from the main story. And to be fair, it is actually quite clever, because where were they going to be able to go after they kill Sterling Archer off? After all, the programme is called Archer. This meant that they could keep him in it without actually having to explain his death, whether he was dead, and they could still use the actor that played Archer. I did actually feel that this was a bit of a cop-out though, because it meant that they didn't need to actually conclude the main story, and theoretically they could go on indefinitely. I did actually, however, point it out to one of my friends that the show is just called Archer, and his mum's in the show as well, whose surname is also Archer, so theoretically they could have continued it on without Sterling. It could have been a nice twist that the show was actually all along about his mum. However, we were just left hanging without a real conclusion. The last thing we saw of Sterling Archer was him floating face down in a swimming pool, probably dead. Some of the notable voice actors in it, they have been in a lot of stuff that you may recognise. H. Jon Benjamin, who is the voice of Bob from Bob's Burgers. I mean, his voice ain't even different, not even slightly. Lana is voiced by Aisha Tyler, who you might actually recognise as Charlie Wheeler from Friends, the one that Ross was dating. Cyril, who is voiced by Chris Parnell, who is the voice of Jerry from Rick and Morty, and is also the guy who plays Dr. Leo Spaceman in 30 Rock. Mallory is voiced by Jessica Walter, who is Lucille Bluth from Arrested Development. Cheryl, who's voiced by Judy Greer, who was Maggie Lang from Ant-Man and the Wasp, and the ex-wife of Ashton Kutcher from 2.5 Men, when he joined that series. The best character is actually just Sterling Archer. He is funny on his own. The other characters do complement his personality quite well, giving him endless streams of jokes that he can tell. The show really wouldn't be the same without him in it. His character idea is just that he's a drunken troll who happens to be a pretty good spy. Me personally, I quite like Cheryl. She's funny. She's a bit insane. She's not very intelligent, and she happens to be a billionaire as well, which was a secret up until season 3. At least I think it was season 3. I'm going from memory there. Finally, I like Krieger, who's a mad scientist, and he literally has no regard for human life, and he just wants to pursue science. Cyril is probably one of the worst characters in it. He's basically just a whiny loser. He's a bit like Jerry Smith from Rick and Morty, who is actually one of the other characters that Chris Parnell actually voices. So I usually do a fun fact section. I'll do another one. So fun facts. Neither Ray nor Cheryl were supposed to be main characters, but obviously they were so likeable that they kept them going throughout the seasons. And I really am glad they were, because Cheryl really is one of the best. Also, Jessica Walter doesn't actually get half of the jokes that she says on the show, or what half of her lines mean, but she still presses through and does them anyway. The overall series is actually well written, but the only issue would be is that there's a lot of inside jokes, so the viewer wouldn't be able to just chuck the programme on and just watch it and find it hilarious. They'd have to watch the whole thing so they can get some of these inside jokes. Some of these inside jokes include, why is it that Brett always gets shot? Why does Archer have Seamus tattooed on his back? Why does Barry hate Archer? Or why Archer can even count bullets? These are all running jokes that go through it from episode to episode, and there's a lot of continuity there in the fact that they actually keep it going. But if you actually do follow from start to finish, you will actually start to feel like one of the gang, and you'll know where the stories are going based on your knowledge of the characters, which would usually be bad, but majority of the time it actually comes to a satisfying conclusion. conclusion. The art style of the show is very realistically drawn cartoons onto backdrops that are really, really well drawn. And in the later seasons, they use CG a lot, which, because the drawings are quite realistically drawn in that sense, they fit in quite well. One of the main things I've always liked about Archer is the fact that you can't actually pinpoint what year it's actually set. Like, for example, in one episode, they might be using computers that are obsolete these days, but in another episode, they'd actually be texting people on their mobile phone. And even the phone itself is obscure to what year it is. Most of the cars are old, and some of the villains just seem to fit better into like a Cold War type era, so it could be anywhere from 1960 to the year 2000. And I like this because it does make it feel like they can do anything, and they don't even have to acknowledge what year it really is. And just because it is a parody, they don't have to acknowledge things like continuity, even though somehow they do it really well. This goes against what I was saying earlier about the later seasons being quite bad, but actually the most recent season was actually really good. It scored points from me because it is a sci-fi and I love sci-fi, and all of the sci-fi references were perfect, even down to who played what type of character role. You have a hologram and an android, you have a power conflict, an alien, and what makes it better is all the characters you know and love from the previous seasons all fit their character type really well. Everything in this season was brilliant, right up until the final episode. Spoiler alert! This is where Sterling Archer wakes up from his 3-year coma. Now, this realisation made me do some research on Archer, and I found out that it's actually going to be brought back for another season. Spoiler alert again, which will bring him back into the world of Spies. It will focus on how the world of Spies has changed in the 3 years that he's been in a coma. The only thing I think the show did bad, spoiler alert, was the coma seasons. Now, I like the sci-fi season, but again, I hold my hands up to that. That's because I love sci-fi, and I'm completely biased in that sense. But in my opinion, it could have just been that season. Now, the writers obviously made their choices and they did it for whatever reasons they had. I do think 3 seasons worth of coma dreams is a bit excessive, but they weren't all bad. I am still going to score this, but I'm not reviewing it as one season. I'm going to review it as the whole entity that is Archer. For me, it gets a 9 out of 10. I'm sure you're seeing a pattern here. I do love cartoons, but cartoons do have to be funny, and Archer is extremely funny. I actually really enjoyed it all the way through, and it only lost a point from me for the last 3 seasons, otherwise it would have been a 10 out of 10. Like and subscribe, as it does help me improve, and if you've already seen the show or disagree with anything I've said about Archer, then please leave it in the comments and get a conversation started. Now, I am on Twitter now as Dean Discuss, and I'm also on Instagram now as discuss_Dean. So please have a look and please follow. Feel free to message.